And we are in Lower Manhattan. That is Sheldon Silver's corruption trial continues. Our own Dominic Carter was in the courtroom following the action. He will fill us in. Then the fourth Republican debate starts just a few hours from now. This one promising to be different from all the others. We'll explain why. Then as D.C. is buzzing about the new book about George H.W. Bush, where the former president doesn't hold back about his son's administration, we will get the lowdown from a guy who worked for Bush 41. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to bring the panel in a little bit, but first, let me go now to Lower Manhattan. Our own Dominic Carter was at the Sheldon Silver trial today, and he files this report.
And good evening to you, Richard. Court has concluded for the night, and court will be closed for tomorrow in honor of Veterans Day. There is lots of activity going on in this Lower Manhattan area. First, let me step out of the shot here in which you can see that there are police officers guarding in front, if you will, of the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse, the federal court in Lower Manhattan. Now let's show you just across the street. As we take a shot there, you can see there's a large contingent of people. They are members of local healthcare union 1199. They were at the rally, a large rally, where Governor Cuomo spoke earlier today. The issue increasing the minimum wage. Those rallies will continue. So now let's talk about what happened in the courtroom today. The trial of Sheldon Silver, the second day in a row where officials from the law firm Whites and Lotzenberg were on the stand, including, Richard, one of the two founding partners, Arthur Luxembourg. Now that's the law firm in question. Will Silver received questionable referrals as a lawyer. Now what happened in the actual courtroom? Yesterday, officials from the law firm testified that Silver received over $4 million for such referrals. And today, they even acknowledged that not only was Silver paid very well, officials from the law firm actually deposited checks on Silver's behalf. So, prosecutors, Richard, have hammered away that Silver controlled much of the budget process with little transparency and accountability, particularly the two health department grants that is the focus here for a cancer researcher. They have totaled about $500,000. So the issue for the prosecution, Richard, is whether or not they can meet the threshold of the connection between these two to prove that there is legal activity, or whether or not New Yorkers, if you will, have to hold your nose, and this is just part of the regular Albany budget proceedings. That is what is going to be determined by this jury that has been listening intently to what's going on. Now, Richard, the activity is winding down here as far as that union rally, but I just want to conclude on this note. We got to see in the courtroom a little bit of how these law firms work when it comes to asbestos cases. For example, what I'm talking about, there was a CEO official, a Greg Arthur Kirkland, who was a CEO of the Simmons law firm, and he testified, this was a competitor of Whites and Luxembourg, and he testified that they would advertise for asbestos cases either on television or the internet, and that's how they would come up with telephone leads for clients. And in many of these cases, they settled with the lawyers receiving up to 40% of the money, but these cases in the past have settled for $2 to $3 million, and currently, according to this witness, they settled for a minimum of $1 million. That is it for now from the trial of Sheldon Silver. I'm Dominic Carter. Richard, let's go back to you in the newsroom.
All right, Dom, thank you very much. And as I mentioned, tomorrow the courthouse will be shut down in observance of Veterans Day. But I want to bring in our panel tonight. Jeannie Zaino is a professor of political science at Iona College, professor of campaign management at NYU. Giancarlo Perasutti, he's a former aide to President George H.W. Bush. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent, joins us as well. Okay, first, Andrew, an obvious question. For those who weren't following where Dominic was showing where the whole rally was going on, had nothing to do with the trial. Today, late this morning, I guess, Governor announced he's going to have a press conference. for all the places in New York to do it. He camps up in Foley Square across the street from where Shelley Silver, obviously born out of the Moreland Commission, his own baby, was on trial talking about basically what constitutes his business as Albany, and he did it to announce a $15 hike in the minimum wage he's proposing for state employees. Why, of all places, there, and why then?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, maybe because he knew he would get news coverage because all the news media was outside or in the courtroom for Shelley Silver. So there's that possibility. I was jokingly saying it's almost like a mafia tactic just to remind Shelley Silver or other witnesses, I'm right here. Be careful what you say. But I honestly don't know. I would say it's a coincidence, but we know Andrew Cuomo well enough to know that there are no coincidences.
Well, there was a bizarre coincidence, if you will. One of the people on the list of those that were going to testify here, and we believe for the prosecution, for the defense, was one Vito Lopez, okay? Vito Lopez, for those who don't remember, was one of the laundry list of Albany characters or officials, in this case a former member of the Assembly, who suddenly passed away. At the age of 74, he involved in his own corruption allegations out of Albany. It would have been fascinating to hear what he would have said, whether it was, many people said certainly with his own sexual assault allegations from former members of his staff and other people in the Capitol. And many people said that Shelley Silver went out of his way to help shelter him from some of that, including paying, as I remember, more than $100,000 to settle certain cases out of the Assembly's coffers in certain cases. So it would have been fascinating to hear what Vito Lopez said constituted business as usual. Just one of the many bizarre twists and turns in this case. And just who's going to be even on the witness list, like Rappels, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it's like watching a soap opera. I mean, to hear today the irony that Vito Lopez passes away and that he is somebody who Shelley Silver has been accused of protecting for so many years for his own dalliances and his own, corruption allegations, and now he passes away today. We're robbed of the chance to hear him on the witness stand and what he might have said. And I think one of the most important things that seems to have come out of the trial today is you've got, as Dominic mentioned, these lawyers testifying. Not only is Shelley Silver getting enormous amounts of money, but he's doing absolutely no work on these cases except the referral. And unfortunately, the defense may be right, actually, when they say, it doesn't smell good, it doesn't sound good, but it's absolutely legal, which I think is the story of corruption in New York politics, right? What doesn't pass the smell test is absolutely legal under our laws, and nobody's doing a darn thing, including the governor, who was at the rally today for the 15th.
Who was the one who shut down the Moreland Commission before what was going to be the penultimate consequence of it, which would have been all these reforms. But Giancarlo, what a quid pro quo is could be in the eye of the beholder. I know the jury will be charged. I know that there'll be instructions from the judge as to it's got to be beyond a reasonable doubt and everything else. But if you're one of those 12 people sitting in the jury box, you say, all right, hold on a second. The guy took $500,000 that he had sole discretion about how to use, didn't check with anybody, whatever, and he gave it to this doc to start what I'm sure was a well-intended, basically your research facility. And magically, all the clients are being referred to his law firm. And by the way, he's enriched to a tune of between $3 and $4 million. And he's not doing any work on this, but he's referring it. And then you have email threads saying, the Assemblyman's no longer giving any money. He's going to use it from basically Albany to pay us. His law firm's not, even though we're giving him all the clients. We might need him in the future. Let's not tick him off. Legally, this might have all been allowed. I don't know yet. But if I'm a juror, I don't know about you, you say, time out a second. He was elected to represent us, and he's the head of the whole one chamber in Albany. I don't care. This thing stinks. Somebody's paying.
I'm not a lawyer, but I'll play one on Richard French Live.
We all do it, yeah.
But I think two things here. Number one, and not to be cavalier about it, but as a general rule, you should never leave public service wealthier than when you went in. I think that's a kind of a good rule to live by.
Universal, though, they all do.
Exactly. And number two is, and Jeannie, I agree with you 100%. You think about how strict and how particular campaign finance laws are in this country. What about the laws and the regulations that govern how our legislators, if they're indeed part-time legislators or full-time legislators, make their income? I mean, I think back to Governor McDonnell in Virginia, and there were a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about partisan Republicans, who were appalled at the fact that this man went to prison for what many believed was not breaking the law, but to your point, doing things that caused jurors to scratch their head and said, well, I'm not quite sure if he broke the law, but he was the chief executive of the state and he should have known better, and therefore we want to punish him. I don't know if that's how you want to mitigate justice in this country.
You're right, and some people even said with Governor Rowland when he went away that, yeah, he should have, but you know what, he could have handled it differently, and he wouldn't have if he was just a better crook, if you will. You know, so now.
But let's slow down, because we've had testimony that Silver made money, and we've had details about how much money he's received and how he got that money. But there's been no testimony so far establishing the quid pro quo. And keep in mind, jurors, I think, do follow the charge. A lot of jurors don't go beyond the scope of what they're instructed to in the jury, and they're not going to convict Shelley Silver just because they don't like Albany. I mean, Bahara hasn't made his case yet. I mean, he hasn't laid out all the foundations of it, and we're still days or weeks away from that happening. But
you're
we're
making
not there
a
yet.
point, though, and other people have made the same point you are, Andrew, but you're making a point that it's a big leap for a juror to say that there was a quid pro quo. From what's just been laid out so far, and just from the email threads from the Dr. Taub, right? He made it clear it was his understanding that if he didn't, forget what he testified, just his threat, that, hey, if I don't give business over to this law firm here, I'm going to make an enemy of one Shelley Silver. Shelley Silver, again, was the same guy who got the money to give it to basically the research, and then the research funneling the patients to a firm of which he profited, as you said, enriching himself in the process.
But there's been nothing specifically punitive, i.e., if I don't give this money to Shelley Silver, I'm going to lose out on all these opportunities. And there's been nothing.
And clearly, there was an email saying, I don't want to make an enemy right here.
He's afraid of it, right? He's afraid of making an enemy out of Shelley Silver, but there's nothing that says, if I don't give this money towards directed to Shelley Silver, it's going to hurt me financially.
And to Andrew's point, I think most legal experts are saying, and I'm certainly not a lawyer either, but most legal experts are saying it's going to depend on how the jury is instructed.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the crux of this case. But that said, whether he's convicted or he's not convicted, you've got to say, the New Yorkers have to be looking at this and saying, either way, we are all losers.
Well, there's two other things I also learned out of this, Shelley, sorry.
Thank you, Richard.
Whack! And I would have that one coming. No, but you had the budget guy in there from the state, and they said, yeah, we appropriated how much money could be used, but we have no idea where he gave it to. And then they said, well, basically, who does? He does. He had the sole discretion as to how, once he was approved the monies to allocate, who he gave it to, how he gave it to him, what increments. He didn't have to check with anybody.
You got to say, it's a heck of a way to run a government.
Oh, my
and
God.
this is what's going on in Albany.
But that
and
is standard operating
and
procedure.
it may be legal, is the sad part of this.
Not just legal, standard operating procedure.
Which is petrifying. All right. Of course, we'll continue to follow us again tomorrow. Court shut down, but I'll have my legal panel tomorrow to see where we are right now. And they're not just playing lawyers on TV. They actually are. Okay. Now, the latest GOP debate just in a few hours, and it's got more storylines and drama than a soap opera itself. But you may not hear about all the catfighting. This one is supposed to be much more about the issues, or at least so they say. The question is, who will that favor? We'll be right back.